My name is Trent. I run marketing at Harvest. And if you've heard this spiel before, stick with it. It's only twice more you have to hear it.
Woo!
It gets better every time. It is like a fine wine. That's what I've been told. Great question from the front of the audience with the guy with the Electrify book. Harvest is a home heating and hot water solution that reduces carbon emissions 90%. In the home, we combine heating and hot water into one ultra-efficient system. And the important thing is that we also load shift for a healthy grid, and we reduce your bills by 30%, which is not the case for some other home HVAC electrified solutions. So big round, thanks for asking, great question. Big shout out to the actually smart people in the room who build and deploy that product. It's great, more at harvest.green. Wow, I'm working on this. A big shout out to the year 1986, the year from which you are experiencing the music in the background. 1986 was the last year that we were at 350 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. So if you want to feel what it's like to live on a livable planet, just transport yourself back, how many years that was, 38 years. I can't do math. Why Gigaton Salon? So we are here, and I will treat you like the crowd you are, which is a crowd that knows how many gigatons we emit every year. If you need a reminder, it's 56. I did some math earlier this morning. That means we have 68 months left to get that down to zero, and we suck as a species at doing that because we're easily distracted. Why Gigaton Salon? So that we can focus. We really have to focus on the gigatons. Make no small plans. Don't do things that are only going to get us partially there. Be ambitious. Focus on the gigatons, and also we're here for fun. The two Fs are focus and fun. Today, as climate nerds, we have a really bad habit of echo chambering ourselves and believing that other people care, and they just don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear things that are unhappy, boring, sad. So we have to have fun in order to make our messages better heard. If you were here for the last panel, we had a lot of really wonderful people who are really great at doing that, and if you didn't hear that, we'll put it on the internet at some point so you can learn about how to do that better. That's me, and speaking of fun, I keep making, this is the third time I made this joke today, it's going to keep happening. What's more fun than a British woman who curses more than I do? It's Zoe Samuel of Starshot Capital, everybody. Give her a big round of applause.
Thank you, Trent.
You're welcome.
So, Trent is illustrating why he's so good at marketing, which is he's now said all these things 3 times today. And as everybody knows, you need to hear about a brand 3 times before you trust it. So now we trust you. Do with it what you will. Use it. Don't use it for evil. So I want to say a quick thank you to all of the people who made it possible for us to be here today. So I'm going to say thank you to the Abundance Institute, who are here and abundant and wonderful. Do I see them? I've lost them, but there they are. They're waving. And I want to say a huge thank you to Impulse Labs, whose beautiful space we're in. So a big hand for Impulse and a big hand for Abundance, please. And thank you to Trent and to Dr. Jane Miller and all the Harvest team as well. And a particular thank you now to Systemiq Capital, who bring you this particular section of the day. And Systemiq have joined us all the way from London. And if you're going to come all the way from London, you need to make that carbon count. You can't do it frivolously anymore. So I'm going to hand over now to Jeremy Brewer, the managing partner of Starshot Capital, who is going to tell us a bit about this portion of the event, to found or not to found.
Hi, it's wonderful to have everyone here. I'm Jeremy Brewer. I'm the managing partner of Starshot Capital. We're a climate-focused venture firm investing in early-stage companies in areas that have been underinvested relative to the climate and economic opportunity. So areas like the industrial sector, food and agriculture, buildings and built environment. Really excited about today's topic and having Systemiq here to speak. Today, this session's going to focus on whether or not to found a company. And that's near and dear to my own heart because that's actually how I got into venture. Sam and I, my partner Sam and I did a climate startup together. And we realized that that company was not going to be as large or impactful as we originally set out for it to be. And so we ended up turning down investor funding, shutting it down, and getting hired by someone to, as he put it, tell him why the rest of his portfolio was going to fail as well. And so really excited about this session, and it'll be wonderful to have Irena and Joshua talk a little bit more about whether or not, what you should consider when you're starting a company. Irena is an incredible person. She's the founding partner of Systemiq Capital. Systemiq Capital is a large climate fund in London. In addition to their climate fund, they also work with one of the largest climate advisory firms in the world that originally spun out of McKinsey. Irena is a prolific climate investor, and she has a lot of experience before climate doing investing, including for a decade at Goldman Sachs. So really wonderful to have her here. And then she'll be speaking with Joshua. Joshua is the co-founder and chief strategy officer of OpenInvest. OpenInvest recently got acquired by JP Morgan. So hopefully if you're founding a company, that's a path that you can follow as well. And before that, Joshua was at the World Wildlife Fund for 6 years and also got an MBA from NYU Stern. So really excited to have them both as panelists, and it's my pleasure to introduce them for this next session.
There's 2 microphones, right? So you keep these up. Yeah. Works? Your works? This one. Yeah. Okay.
So not.
Yeah, good. Try.
Good.
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 Perfect. So thanks, Jeremy, for the introduction, and welcome, everyone. So we had the pleasure of being an investor in OpenInvest, so we're going to sort of dig into history a little bit.
I'm nervous. I just saw the size of your script. It's like every word.
That's what happens when you travel and you don't have a printer. So I didn't want to read from a phone. Right, so OpenInvest, quite uniquely, you retain the identity even post the acquisition. So there is still a company. You can go on the website, OpenInvest. So OpenInvest is and was a fintech company founded in 15-16, exited in 21, so what will be 3 years this summer. The mission was and remains to overhaul the financial system and align capital with social and environmental values. And you were one of the first companies to combine algorithmic investing with sustainable and responsible investment, ESG. Started as B2C, then moved on to a B2B, B2B2C model. And you started a company with Connor. So Connor was the CEO, you were the co-founder and head of strategy. In 15, 16, or perhaps 14, when you started thinking about starting OpenInvest, there was no such thing as ESG. Right? It was a tiny little thing, climate was still largely a world of kumbaya, and it was very far from, touching capital markets. In my mind, this whole world, started booming when BlackRock's Larry Fink wrote that famous shareholders letter in January 18. But you started this 4 years before, at least you started thinking about this 4 years before. So what made you believe back then, quite contrarian, in a way, that ESG was going to become a big thing?
Hi, everybody. Very humbled to be here right now. I'm sure you're going to get way more being with each other, but hopefully I can add a little value up here. So there's the impact, the mission, the reason we started OpenInvest, but in terms of conviction around the market, in my role at the World Wildlife Fund, I did a fair bit of public speaking as well, and we would constantly get people my age especially who'd raise their hands and say, we're talking about impact investing, sustainable investing, raising their hands, oh, this is awesome, how can I do this, how can I get involved? people wanting to get into the space, people wanting to figure out how to do it with their own investments, and the solution set was really pretty crappy. So these are like, there were green mutual funds that would cost 2% and maybe spotty track records. And the hardest problem, and the thing that was most interesting to me was that everyone has their own values. So when it comes to just financial allocation, most of us should probably leave it to the experts. But when it comes to your values, that's really up to you. And I thought surely the future is not just more and more like mutual funds or later ETFs. It's like you've got to have the ability to personalize to people's values. That's actually turns out to be a very hard technical problem in the financial space. And then meanwhile, I had a good old friend of mine. People like founder stories, so I'll personalize this. So good old friend of mine, Connor, and his buddy, they were leaving Bridgewater Associates, which is I think it still might be, it was the world's largest hedge fund. And they had this unique set of technical expertise around automating portfolio construction, portfolio management, risk controls, trading, the entire tech stack at this hedge fund. They had built the systems, led teams. They were looking to leave and start something more impactful, more world-changing. In their roles, and again, this speaks to how the world has changed, they hadn't even heard of ESG, SRI, like those acronyms had never crossed their desk. And so they thought they had to leave finance entirely. And I only knew these guys from like, we partied together in our 20s when you got out of college and still wanted to be in college. We never thought we'd work together. And I was like, no, guys, there's actually this whole space. It's growing. At the time, we were using SRI for a while. That was, the acronyms keep changing. There's this whole space. It's growing. Socially responsible investing. And the product offerings are really weak. And it just turned out that we had, and I think this speaks to like when you found or not found, we just had the right combination of skills around the table between my industry background and then their technical backgrounds in the financial space, and then seeing those tailwinds in terms of believing in the growth. And then, of course, I think for a lot of you can look at market stats and you can look at what your friends are doing, but you also believe in truth, right? Like, we have to resolve the climate crisis somehow, right? Or we're going to take our best shot. So you believe that even if people aren't seeing certain things now, there is going to be further and further tailwinds in that direction, because there has to be, right? There has to be resolutions or work towards resolutions in these areas. And so we believe the same thing about what happened in the financial space. And then, of course, we started OpenInvest, and I can get into all of our twists and turns, but that was the beginning of the company.
So we came into Series A in 2018.
I should say what the company does fundamentally. So,
Yes.
yeah, sorry. Everyone doing green stuff in the financial space back then, and still pretty much today, they build and launch funds. That's the business model. You build a fund, a mutual fund, an ETF, and then you try to sell it to a lot of people. I felt, or I achieved conviction that the future of ESG is not products, it's features. Meaning it's not just buying a fund, it's everything that happens before, during, and after that. It's your experience determining your values, doing diagnostics on your current portfolio, personalizing portfolios to your current values, proxy voting. We built proxy voting with a swipe on your smartphone, like as easy as a dating app. You can vote in board-level solutions. All of that requires huge technical overhauls of the current wealth management platforms. And so we ultimately built the biggest, strongest, most like tech horse-powered shop in Wall Street. And I think we still are that today. We're 120 people within JP Morgan. And all we do every day is obsess about how can we make it so easy that it's a no-brainer for every single investor to obviously apply their values to their finances. Like, our North Star is, if I poll a random audience and you ask how many people want like ESG products, like 15% of people would raise their hands, and that's even the lie. But if you said, hey, I'm going to give you a button, and you press this button, whatever you care about is seamlessly going to apply to all of your assets, and it's going to have an immaterial impact on your performance, your cost. You want to press the button. Every single person in the room will raise their hands pretty much, and it doesn't matter what part of the country you're in. So that's our North Star. Like the whole thing should be seamless, easy, reflect your personal, most deeply held values, and be high impact. And all that takes tech. It's all tech. So that's why we were a venture-backed startup.
So coming back to, so you started out of Y Combinator, and then your seed round was led by A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, right? So how much, I guess the first question is, how valuable was going through Y Combinator? And then, perhaps for the founders in the audience, how did you persuade A16Z to lead the seed round?
I don't know what it's like today. I'll be interested to talk to people. I remember back then, you're like, before you start a startup, you get this impression, you're like, San Francisco, where the streets are paved with gold, and it's just raining money, and then, even if you can't get that money, back then it was like, there's all this Chinese and Russian money that they can't even figure out where to put that. It's probably dirty words now, but like back then that was like, there's all that money too. And it is the hardest freaking thing. Like it turns out it's really, really hard to get someone to write you, not even $1 million check, but like to get like your cousin to write like a $25,000 like pre-seed check. I'm like, I thought you loved me and trusted me. It turns out they don't. It's so hard. And we had everything. We had great industry pedigrees, to the extent it matters, educational pedigrees. Then through Y Combinator, I was an advisor when they were in YC. I was not part of the YC batch. I became full-time third co-founder right after. Got Y Combinator, and it was hard. It was hard. We did our. I led our fundraising, and so there's pre-seed, which was all those $25,000, a few $50,000 checks, twisting the arms of every single person making all kinds of promises. Very hard. And then raising for our seed round, I think we engaged, I think it was something like 180 different VCs. I have to go back in Salesforce, and we did 60 pitches. And then we were down, for some reason, Andreessen Horowitz was near the end, I think just because we didn't have a contact or couldn't get any contact there. So we'd gone through everything. I think we were down to 1 week of operating cash and been rejected by everybody and their sister. And then we got a call back from Andreessen that they wanted to lead our seed. And that was, I know I should say when my kids were born, but I think that was the happiest day of my life, actually. I was I think I started doing push-ups, and then we ran down, started taking shots at the bar down the first floor. That was nuts. Yeah. It's hard. Jesus.
It's also hard, on the other side, when you raise investor money into a fund, it doesn't get any easier.
I know it's hard too, by the way. The amount of money that we wasted in the first year and a half because we were learning on someone else's dime how to run a startup. Mm-hmm. Now, as an investor, I'd be very circumspect about investing in first-time founders because we just burned a lot learning, hiring the wrong people and figuring out how do you do HR and cap tables and all the stuff that, in theory we now know. So yeah, your first-time founders, it's hard to get a check, and that was in those are in the boom times. Although I think we're in a certain type of good time for green tech now, but you guys know better than I do. And
Josh, you are a great example that there are so many paths to become a founder, right? So when you were at WWF, what led you to believe that you could be a co-founder, right? What led you on that path?
I saw problems. I saw that there was needed better retail solutions for investing with your values. I didn't know that I would be the one to work on that. So it was a bit of separate serendipity. I don't know what advice to give young people and my kids. It's party with really smart people in your 20s because maybe they'll ask you to work with them later. Yeah, it worked out. And then when I was in, this isn't what you asked, but there's a huge life stage thing in it for me. We talked a little bit back there, would I start another startup? Now I have little kids. I had to be, and I showed my co-founders as an advisor, I would gun it, balls to the wall, 14 hours a day. You are going to twist every arm. If you are not twisting every arm of anyone you've ever known to the breaking point to fuel your startup and make it successful, you're not trying hard enough. And that's how hard you have to go. And you have to do that, plus have, in my experience, the amazing background, plus a ton of luck.
And the right cycle.
Yeah, so I'll include that in the luck bucket.
When the three of you started, how did you go after making the right hires at the beginning, attract the right people, right? That's often where startups get it wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. We had lots of bad hires, so I don't know how we compared to the norm. Plenty of bad hires. But back then it was like impossible. That was, remember the terrible labor market where you couldn't hire anyone, and there was like the war for talent. So I don't think it's quite as bad now, but it was intense. But like early on, you're pulling in people. I will say, like you guys know this. There's a certain advantage in this space, right? That even in a full-on war for talent, especially in something like the Bay Area, there's a spike. There's a long tail of people who are really looking for fulfillment and mission and global impact. And you have access. You have premier access to that. I'm not saying they're going to work at a discount, but you can get very talented people. Because you don't need to hire everybody. You don't need to be in the middle of the curve, right? You're just trying to hire a few people so you can just pull from that long tail. So it's a huge benefit of being a mission-driven company. We we're very early as a public benefit corporation. We were and still are very mission-driven, and it definitely helps. And back then, VCs were also or somewhere like along our journey, the VCs started to all change their web pages and be like, changing the world, and then like some of them started to add an ESG or environmental, like even pillar to their practice. So it helps.
Do you remember your first customers? The very first customer you signed up and how you got there?
Yeah, I mean those are all friends and family, and I still remember.
No, not investor. Like a paying client.
No, that too.
Too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, because you started B2C, of course.
We started
right.
B2C, yeah, 100%. We were like, I remember we had to hit some targets or something before we were going out to fundraise, and like we just set up a call bank, I recruited some friends as advisors, and then all sit, and we were just like literally calling our own distant friends to telemarket, to get them to open accounts.
And when you then did your first enterprise account, how that was very different. So do you remember how that was?
Yeah. So I don't think most of you are in the fintech space, so it gets a little complicated. There was a lot of iterating on channels and channel pivots, and in some channels you get a lot of people who love to. They end up wasting your time, but they're not trying to do that. They just think it's so cool and fascinating, and they like shiny things, and maybe want to talk to their end clients about these cool things, but you're trading stories, you're not moving money. And you got to be really wary of that. And that's a general thing, though. You'll get bled out. Like, you have this balance you have to strike where you have to take most of the calls, you have to do most of the meetings, because you never know exactly when you turn over something that's useful, but at the same time they will just bleed you out. So the faster you can kind of cut to the chase and hone your instincts, the better. I know that's generalizable, but you don't want to know the specifics of these like people we were dealing with, just like financial advisors and stuff.
Do you remember if there were things that kept you awake at night at the time, and they shouldn't, and there were other things that should have kept you awake at night but didn't?
Did you warn? Was that on the list?
It was. It was.
The whole thing is just that was just a stressful period where you're just up a lot with anxiety. Oh, the life cycle thing. So at that time, I decided I had newborn twins, and my wife was a grad student. So at Cal, so it was really crazy. And then the deal she made with me was, if you can raise enough money to be able to pay yourself for 6 months, then I'll let you go join them full time as a co-founder. So that's when I went on twisting arms for a long time. I got 25K checks. I was basically doing my day job at WWF and this simultaneously. And then we finally got there, and then I came on full time. And then in my mentality, it was, I am basically going to be a bad dad for 5 years and just gun it on this thing, and then set up my, hopefully be successful, and then I'll take over later, and then basically I was going to backload parental duties. We never actually had an explicit conversation, so it didn't work out as seamlessly as I thought. But I'm approaching my payout.
Now, going back to ESG or responsible investing, the way it was called, right? If you think about that first letter, that Larry Fink wrote, the last one, he writes one every year, right? The one he wrote this year was kind of the exact opposite, where ESG is becoming the thing that is not talked about anymore in financial circles.
Who would have guessed, right? Who would have guessed?
Who would have guessed? Yeah, as the wind flies.
But this is when this is when you've made it. Is when you're like a Republican talking point. Come on, if your technology is a Republican, like one of the top 3 Republican talking points, you've definitely broken through.
But I guess the question here is, whilst we all read this narrative, is this real? Did you have to adapt and change somehow your business, or is it just like a little vocal minority that is not consequential?
So the whole industry, my whole space got the Trump bump. So it was already growing. We'll call it ESG investing. We'll just pick an acronym. It was growing. Everyone kept thinking we're in the golden age, but we're still very niche. And then in 2016, when Trump got elected, there was a really nice acceleration in the space overall, because liberals were frustrated with politics and were seeking change through other means. So it was actually helpful to the business. Not transformative, but there's an inflection of the growth curves there.
But in the last 12 months, right? What are you seeing? As we all read this narrative,
So I'm seeing, I've landed at the right firm. So part of one of the reasons or gates with JP Morgan acquiring us is they had philosophically already arrived at a shared conclusion, like with us before acquisition, which was that the future is personalization. Meaning, like, they didn't want a position around one particular set of values. They service clients all over the country and all over the world, and they couldn't come out and take a very specific loud stand like Larry Fink had. But they did believe in the growth of this space, but they were going to approach it through personalization. Once you believe that, then there's a set of things that you are going to build. You need to build portfolio customization. You need to personalize how people's proxies get voted. You basically end up building all the things we had built, and so we ended up looking like a buffet to them. So it was actually the philosophical alignment that helped fuel the acquisition. But my point is, like, ESG, like whatever happens there, I don't think personalization and values, and now you're seeing a lot of our competitors shifting to the acronym that we shifted to years ago, which is like values-based investing. Because they might have Christian values, they might have whatever values, but people have values, right? Most people, not everybody. Most people have stated values. And so being able to personalize around that is going to be good for the client, and I believe good for the world. I think apathy is the main problem. So let's get, we have this whole weapon up there, which is like all of people's capital. Like, let's get it in the game. And on that, I think it's going to be very positive. And for JP Morgan, like, the growth behind this has been solid. Like, it has been undaunted by the current political rhetoric around ESG and DEI and all that.
That's great. So I think I see the next panel.
Oh, we're in trouble. I didn't even.
Exactly.
I didn't even say
I was waiting for someone to start waving. So thanks, Josh. I don't know if we have time for questions. I'm looking at Zoe. Questions? Or we move? Right. Any question?
My question is, you mentioned selling to JP Morgan, and I'm curious why you decided to sell when you did, or keep growing on your own, or like what were the decisions around that? And were you trying to get acquired as your exit strategy from the beginning?
So during the journey, people would always ask, and VCs will ask, what's your exit strategy? And our answer, honestly, was like, it's all the same happy path. Like, we're going to build a successful company, and we'll have better and better options if we do that. So that was true. And my co-founder and I didn't really see eye to eye about trying to sell at that time, which actually turns out to be a very good negotiation strategy with your counterparty. And with JP Morgan, like, obviously you're looking at the financial side of it, but there really was a mission piece to it. So our mission was to mainstream values-based investing, right? I was never interested in like the kind of impact investing, like, we're gonna get like 5% of rich people's portfolios. I was like core asset flows, mainstream. I want 100% of people apply. So it just doesn't get much more mainstream than JP Morgan Chase. Like, more than half of Americans use some kind of JP Morgan Chase product. So in theory, having this ready to go install base now as we build these solutions was very attractive. And then I mentioned that philosophical alignment. And then finally, the sense that we could maintain our culture, maintain our brand, we would be empowered, we'd have senior level access to execute on what we wanted to do. So like, yeah, we're still, pushing through the complexities of a big place, but that the impact barometer was front and center for us in that decision.
If you could go back in time and have a conversation with yourself just prior to this thing, what advice would you have given yourself?
A lot of that would be probably pretty specific to our thing, but like, it's a great question. Now I'm just like, dang, why don't I have that power? I think move to leverage distribution ASAP, as opposed to like B2C. So finding channel partners that have distribution lines and focusing on that hard and early. And then when you do that, that sounds great, and there's trade-offs. So those are longer sales cycles. And certain VCs like it, certain don't. But like, then the key there, which is more subtle, is you really need to find their business problem and their motivations, and you need to have a solution that's going to be making them lots of money, like from day one. So you have to really understand their incentives, align with their incentives, because regardless, they will take your calls. Like, if you're in a sexy space or you're sexy people, they will take your call, and then they will schedule another one a month later and do another a month later, and they won't say this, maybe they don't even realize it, but what they're doing is maintaining their feelers on what's going on in the industry. And they're doing it on your time, and your time is the most valuable thing you have as a founder because you're constantly triaging. So you won't even realize that you're bleeding yourself out, and you're like so excited to go back to everyone, like, I just had another call with Goldman Sachs or whatever. No, you gotta like really figure out their incentives, and then go right for the jugular there to get leverage distribution. And that's also something that can lead to a buyout.
Maybe one more, if anyone.
Oh, make sure you're talking to the right people. Like, it's not the innovation or sustainability people. They don't have any juice.
Hi. Thanks. This has been super interesting to listen to. You gave an example earlier of, you asked people, if you could have your money be aligned with your values, but it won't cost you anything in terms of the return on investment. Do you think that that's how it works for most people, alignment with their values? Or do you think that like some people who align with their values will get better return and some people will get like a worse return? Or like, how do you think about that space?
Long term, yes, I do think that's how it works. if you have the right implementation and the right technology. Meaning, I'll just give you a metaphor. This is not investment advice, by the way.
You've learned the compliance.
Well, if I really learned it, I wouldn't even answer your question. Like, let's take a very simple thing. S&P 500, and you're like, I'm going to exclude this oil, like whatever, this company I don't like, right? There's a traditional mentality in the industry, like, oh my God, you're going to lose your shirt, like you can't distort the benchmark, right? Most of that is because people don't have the tools to implement, or they don't want to do the work to implement for you, but they'll make the argument you're going to lose your shirt. No one's freaking out that it's not the S&P 501, right? Like, no one's freaking out that benchmark isn't a little bigger, and you're missing. Did you know you're missing a stock by holding the S&P 500, not the S&P 501? Do you understand? So, but as soon as you like then make one notch deviation from the norm, everyone freaks out. So it's not like the more you restrict or distort your portfolio according to your values, you generally are going to cause more volatility on that. But if you're a long-term investor and you're doing it right, like you should be averaging around the mean. Just like the S&P 500 index is meant to be represent the average of the US economy, but it's still just a sample. So you can take a different sample. So anyway, that maybe there's a little in the weeds. My answer to you is generally I think no. And then, there's segments of people who want to go hard in certain areas, just like some people want to go to Whole Foods and pay twice as much for eggs, and no one's freaking out, that's okay, as long as they can just go in eyes open. So that's kind of the second level solve, is that in finance there's people that should be able to do certain things, and you just need the right level of transparency and ease and prediction so that they can do that with comfort. But this whole thing of, we focused on passive investing with overlaying your values and hugging those benchmarks as much as possible, because we did want to eliminate that. We wanted to eliminate every concern, including that one, as much as we could.
Good. I think we're way over time.
Sorry, thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Stage, what I don't think anyone's done so far today. Oh, there it is. And there it is. This means nothing. It's a bipartisan event, but I am going to sit on the left side of the stage. Hi, everybody. I'm Megan Sass, and I am not currently working in climate. I'm not in tech. I'm here as a civilian, and I'm here through my good friend Zoe Samuel from Starshot. And we met a bit over a decade ago. We're here to talk about to found or not to found, whether you want to be a founder or an employee in a company, that moment of choice. And so I just want to start with a brief story, which is that years ago, I met Zoe because she was working with another friend of mine as a writer. And they had written a web series, and they asked me to audition. So I auditioned, and I got a call back. And for those of you not familiar, that's like a second interview. And I also, at the time, happened to be in what I thought was a serious relationship. And my girlfriend and I had been planning on going on a vacation. And when I got the call back, it conflicted with the vacation. And I said, okay, sorry, babe, I can't, vacation is canceled. I have to go take this call back. I thought this was a fun vacation. Apparently this was the vacation to save the relationship. So this ended the relationship. And I thought I'd better get this job. But I did. And then I thought, something good better come of this job. And over 10 years later, Zoe is one of my closest friends and colleagues, as are the other people that worked on that particular project. So, we're talking about choices, and we're talking about paths here today. So we want to welcome to the stage Eric and Lyn. Eric is the founder of, yes, clap. Thank you. So Eric is the founder of Ren Energy, and Lyn Stoler works as the head of marketing here at Impulse.
I'm not the head of marketing.
You're not the head of marketing. But it says right here that you are. I think you've been promoted.
Oh my God, Deanna, I'm coming after your job, girl.
So Let me tell you about what their companies do, and then I'll ask you what you actually do here.
Incredible.
So Ren, which is Eric's company, helps brands such as Google and Target decarbonize their scope 3 emissions across their entire supply chain, achieving their net zero goals. Even me as a total civilian knows that that's incredibly impressive. Impulse, who are also hosting us here today. Everyone, can we have a hand for Impulse, please? Thank you, yes. They create induction stoves that help electrify homes and decarbonize the built environment. So thank you both for joining us. So you both had very different paths to get to where you are as founder and employee. So would you tell us a little bit about that path? And Lyn, tell us where the path led and what your actual job is now.
Absolutely. So it looks like we have like a little glimpse into the future. I don't know, Deanna, maybe I'm the head of marketing someday, but I'm currently the climate and policy lead here at Impulse. Thank you. This path was very circuitous. I'm gonna give you the super short version of it, which is that I started off in biology and public health, realized that climate had a lot of implications for public health, and so I started this research center at UCLA called the UCLA Center for Healthy Climate Solutions, and I was like, I am going to make change through policy that is driven by data, and I was super excited about it. It was great, but I felt a few steps abstracted away from the real impact, and so after growing that center across the entire UC system, I decided to just quit my job, and I went on this like 1.5 year long find yourself journey where I traveled across the United States. In the first year I went to 30 cities. I started blogging about it. That blog randomly made me a lot of wonderful friends and kind of got me into the climate tech community. In that process I learned, like it was a very squiggly process, and I learned a lot about different types of climate technologies, and I got connected through a friend to Sam D'Amico. I interviewed Sam, filmed him for a documentary that we were making, and about 1.5 years later, after that, I'm now sitting here. In between that, I did join what is sort of an incubator and sort of a community called South Park Commons, and made some really amazing friends there, and actually explored whether or not to become a founder, did the whole like co-founder journey with a very good friend who's here, and ultimately decided to join Impulse instead of becoming a founder. So hopefully that's the sort of angle that I can speak to, but definitely can't talk about actually becoming a founder.
All right, thank you. Yes, no pressure, Eric, but that was fantastic.
So I'll keep this really brief. I used to build wind farms for Goldwind. So South America, North America, Asia. Was based out of Chicago, so actually building them on the project site, climbing up and down turbines and all that. We built the first wind project in Chile, in Panama, and in Ecuador, and some countries in Asia as well. But randomly, Nike found me and wanted me to lead their renewables. So they happen to have manufacturing in a lot of these countries. And Nike, for me, from being from Portland, Oregon, is just the hometown company. It's where a lot of my buddies worked that I grew up with, but I never thought about it as a place to work. You know, I'm a renewables and power guy. So the prospect of working for Nike, you know, Jordans and athletic shoes, it was kind of strange. But once they explained it, it made sense. Nike had 2,400 factories. They had committed to going 100% renewable, but they had no idea how. If you put yourselves in Nike's shoes, if you make shoes and basketballs and t-shirts, I mean, how do you know how to do renewable energy? So that's how I ended up at Nike. And then I'll wrap this up by saying 3 aha moments at Nike caused me to create Ren. The first one is, I mean, imagine yourself in my shoes. You're now head of renewable energy at Nike. They say, we want you to get everything 100% renewable in our supply chain. Your first question is probably like, what does that mean? Like, how much is that, right? So that was my question as a wind guy. It's like, how many megawatts do you want? And they said, we don't know. And I was like, what, how many facilities is this at least? And they said, it's roughly 2,400, but we don't know where all of them are. We know where some of them are, but you're gonna have to go figure this out. And it took me 2.5 years, but this is the punchline. If you take all of Nike's energy production or usage worldwide, that ends up being the 94th largest country in this world. Out of 200 countries, you can say, Nike's an average sized country. Now think, that is one company, right? What about the entire Fortune 100? If they're each the size of a small, medium country, this is a massive, huge-ass problem, right? So how are you going to get after this? Well, that was the first aha moment. The second one was, you guys probably know this, but Nike manufactures right next to Adidas, right? And Puma. The factories, if you guys have been to them in Asia, these
We
industrial
definitely
parks.
all knew that, yes.
They do. But even right next to them, so outside of the industry, Coca-Cola, Ford, Procter & Gamble, other companies, they all manufacture in the same place, in the same little industrial park, special economic zones. I see these guys during stuff like SF Climate Week or New York Climate Week or just sustainability events. I know that they have committed to getting 100% renewable, but they don't know how. At Nike, we had 300 people in sustainability like 8 years ago. I had a team of 30 people to get after renewable energy. Most other people had like 2 people to try to do that. And remember, we're talking about a country-size footprint. So the aha moment for number 2 was, what if we work together? We're all in the same place. We've all committed to getting 100% renewable. What if we source wind and solar together for all of our assets that are co-located in the same industrial park? Then we all win. The last aha moment was simply speed. Corporations have committed to going 100% renewable by 2030, and that's bullshit. So, coming from a guy who built wind farms, I did like 1 or 2 a year, and I work really fucking hard, really hard, and that was my pace, like 1 or 2 a year. I had 12,000 facilities at Nike. Now, all of these companies with thousands of facilities, you really think they're gonna get thousands of facilities renewable by 2030 by what, hiring a bunch of people like me? You'd have to hire thousands of people to take a country-sized portfolio renewable, right? So these 3 aha moments, that was when I realized there has to be a fast, scalable way to do this. Otherwise, it's just not gonna work. We have to build a technology that somehow combines everyone's assets. All the global corporations, what if we could combine all of their assets and get them renewable in chunks together rather than one by one? And that's how Ren was born.
Amazing. You're making me think we're not so different. Because I, too, as a copywriter and video producer, have had clients that say, I want this. And I say, do you have any idea what that actually means? And they say, no. What's your budget? Oh, well, it's $300. So you have already made this decision, founder, employee. What do you want people that are at this moment of decision, what do you want them to know? What is the advice you would give? What do you wish someone had told you?
I hesitate to say this because I think this is supposed to be inspirational, but just don't do it.
That's the same thing my parents told me when I was saying I want to get into comedy.
I would honestly say, legit, don't do it. It's just so dumb. You can go make money in easier, smarter ways. If you want to make money, if this is about money or power or how cool you think you are or your ego, go do some other shit. It is way easier. This sucks. It will strip you of it'll strip you of everything. Your dignity. Okay, you literally have to be willing to get rid of every penny in your bank account. Like our team was on food stamps, government-assisted healthcare, government-assisted housing. Like how far are you willing to actually go? If you're the type of person that in the investing world, I think they call it cockroach. If you're a cockroach, then yeah, Like, if you're tough enough, do it. But what are you actually willing to sacrifice? For anyone here who's actually trying to be a founder, what are you willing to give up? Your relationships, your money, your health, and more? If you're willing to do that and you believe in something so strongly, yeah, go for it. Otherwise, have a good life. Like, have fun. Like,
Yeah, have fun and do it quickly, because I don't know if you've heard, but the planet is dying. No, I'm just kidding. All right.
I have no idea how to follow
All right,
that.
save us. Make it positive. Let's spin it.
Okay. I have to say, if I'm talking super fast or if I'm visibly shaking like a chihuahua, it's because my blood is half caffeine right now. So I have to just like start with that. Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is that like doing the career pivot to like becoming someone that like, you know, is a part of an early stage startup, even though, you know, I'm not a founder. But I came from academia and not really strictly in climate, and my degree is in molecular biology, right? Like, that was a pretty hard pivot, and that also robbed me of every penny to my name. I actually sold my eggs to finance the entire, like, founder journey, you know? So it wasn't something that, like, comes cheap. So it's not just, like, becoming a founder, but even getting to the point of deciding, like, do I or do I not want to be a founder is, like, really, really intense. I no longer have to sell my eggs because because now I work at this, you know, at Impulse, which is just this amazing company. But I think that, like, honestly, that what ended up driving my final decision not to become a founder, despite really, like, giving it a 1.5 year long go, there was, like, a few things. One of them was really this, am I cut out for this? And, like, part of me really didn't think that I was. It turns out that being an employee at an early stage startup is also incredibly fucking hard. So I don't know how much easier my life is. Actually, it's probably a lot easier based off of what you said. But, you know, I think that the other piece is that through the like founder discovery journey, like going through that exploration, I think that I was kind of like Silicon Valley pilled. You know, in SF, it's so easy to, like, you know, you meet a founder, you're like, that is sexy. Like, I want to do that, you know? And it's like really, like, there's so much social capital that comes with being a founder here. And I think that part of me wanted to be a founder just to be a founder, not because I had any good reason to become one. And luckily, I went on this co-founder journey with someone that was not letting me maintain that mindset. And so he really laid out a few key questions that we had to answer, which was like, do you have a problem that you actually want to solve as a founder, right? Do you have a solution to that problem? Is that solution a business, or is it like a fun side project? And then finally, like, are you like the actual person, if it is a business, to run that business? We found several problems we actually wanted to solve, and some of them seemed like they might be viable businesses, but we weren't even really that excited about them. And on top of that, both of us, I think, struggled with whether or not we were the right fit to run that type of business. And the one thing that I will say is I had a lot of insecurity during that founder journey of what gives me the right, what makes me qualified to run a company. I'm actually curious what sort of helped, like, you build that conviction, because I never really answered that question for myself. But I think that after working at Impulse for the time that I have, I now know that, like, if I ever do take that founder journey and decide that I am a cockroach, like, I have the skills that, like, just, like, you really cut your teeth as an employee at an early stage startup, and I feel so much more confident that if I ever do make that leap, it will suck way less, probably.
Awesome, thank you. This is the first time I'm hearing cockroach. Is there like a big Kafka fan base inside of the...
This is all about the metamorphosis.
Ah, yeah, okay. Well, yeah, that's what we're talking about. So a very wise person said they wonder what gave you the confidence. Would you mind answering Lyn's question?
The audacity.
Well, first of all, the funny thing about San Francisco and founders being cool, no one gives a shit in Portland, Oregon, where we're from. So I think we're somewhat insulated. I mean, we care about hiking and fishing, camping. Like, this is not, like, that's cool. We don't care about blah,
And
blah business.
everyone else in the country cares about what Portland thinks, so you definitely... The old
True.
saying, as goes Portland.
We have the highest concentration of waterfalls in the United States, just saying. You should come see it. What gave me the audacity? It was just born out of my pain at Nike. It was this stuff, we literally, James is here, Morgan is here, we built the stuff that I wish I had and needed to take a country-sized corporation 100% renewable. You can't do that manually in the old way that we've done it, which is just building 1 or 2 wind farms a year and trying to do this in a completely non-scalable way. It was born out of my pain, and I also latched onto something I believed hard enough to literally die trying. I've spent my life trying to figure out who am I, what do I care about, what the purpose of life is. I know this is quite esoteric and ridiculous, but I have spent a lot of time thinking about that. And I have spent a lot of time looking into different social entrepreneurship options. Once I found something that I knew could change the world in a quantifiable way down to the kilowatt hour, and I could throw myself into it or die trying, I went all in. I've ended up in the ER twice over the last year and a half, so everything I'm saying is not theoretical or conjecture. Like, you do suffer. But is it worth it? Yes, if you believe in it enough.
Is it fair to say that if you're not suffering, you're not trying hard enough? If you're not in the ER, then you don't really care about climate?
I think if
Someone boo me? Oh, thank you. Okay.
I think if you're cushy and you're comfortable, you're probably gonna lose to someone like me that will kill you and take your lunch.
Solid. So it sounds like, Lyn, you're talking about one of the things, people want to be a founder, and so they go looking for problems to solve. But Eric, you didn't have to look for the problem. You knew what the problems were. They were in front of you, and so you said, okay, I want to solve them. Gotcha. Okay. So I started as an actor, and in order to have things to act in, had to start writing. And in order to get the things written, produced, I had to become a producer. And then in order to fund that, I had to become a copywriter. So my question for you, because this isn't actually about me, my question for you is, what are some of the skills that you have, or the relationships you've had that you thought were tangential, but that actually come up quite often in what you do and even affect your day-to-day?
You have to have unbelievable grit and be really tough. But the relationships thing, like with James here and with Morgan here, you don't necessarily meet people who will have the biggest impact in your life how you might think. During COVID, me and Morgan started a workout group called Rat Shit Fitness. I'm not a workout guy. I never have been. It's not my thing, but it was the only thing you could do to create a community during COVID. If you worked out 6 feet apart in the parks and such. So that's actually literally how I met my co-founder, was working out in the park. It quickly turned into a social club. We brought alcohol to every workout session to rehydrate, and we brought these speakers, and it'd be like really loud music. We'd dominate the park and put blankets out, meat and cheese and vodka, and that's how I met my co-founder. So you don't actually know how you're gonna meet your co-founder, I guess. James, I don't know where he is. He's somewhere here, but he was an early investor in Thursday Boots. For anyone that likes boots, I like boots. And I looked up Thursday, and I thought he was the CEO because he, silver flecked hair, and he looks very distinguished. Turns out he wasn't, but we got to start talking about sustainability, and I'm a bit jet lagged. We just got back yesterday from Europe for 2.5 weeks, and this is the guy that got us in front of Apple. and Amazon, and Maersk, and Google Europe, and IKEA, or I can keep going on down the list. But we're fucking killing it. And this guy, I met him because I wanted boots.
Amazing. All right, so suffer or you don't care, stay dehydrated. Learning a lot of. Lyn, how about you?
I too am chronically dehydrated. But I mean, yeah, I'd mentioned this, but I met Sam making a documentary, right? And I was only making that documentary and only introduced to Sam because I was like blogging, right? And I met this dude over here who was also a blogger and one of Sam's friends. And so it's like, you take these really crazy circuitous paths, like whether you become a founder or you join a startup. I think that the thing that I get really irritated by is like, there's always these super clean, like, yeah, my mom had cancer. Now I am building a company that cures cancer. And I'm like, that is so cool for you. And that is really dope. But like for a lot of people, I don't think that the founder journey or the like startup or like even just like, what do you want to do with your life journey is that straight. And I think that like there's just this pressure to filter the stories in retrospect for something that's like super neat and super clean. And, you know, like as part of my founder exploration, I learned a ton about the electrical grid, right? And now I get to work on distributed energy resources because I learned a ton about the electrical grid. I didn't know anything about electricity before this. In high school, my physics teacher, when we learned about electricity, turned to me and he said, Lyn, did that lesson make sense to you? And I said, yeah, actually kind of. And he said, good, then it made sense to everybody else. Like, that's how little I understood about electricity, right? But like, this is what I get to work on now. I don't know, like, all of that is to say that you take these like really circuitous routes, like because I blogged and because I made a documentary, now I get to do this. And I don't know, I think there's this pressure to do the thing that you are like, oh yeah, this is what I've done my whole career, so that's the next company I'm gonna join, or that's the startup that I'm gonna build. And like, it just literally doesn't have to be like that, so like, you know, just kind of like, fuck it, do what you want.
Awesome. Yeah, round of applause for that. All right, looking at the time, we have time for one more question. And in the green room, we were talking, and Lyn and I discovered that we are both big Star Trek fans. And we discovered that Eric is a lot less nerdy than Lyn and I are. But my question for both of you, to end on a sort of hopeful, futuristic note, what is more hopeful and futuristic than Star Trek? Do you have a Star Trek character that is your role model, and why?
I'll go because your answer is so much better. I mean, this is like so classic, but I sort of want to be Spock, and I sort of have a crush on Spock. So this is a yes and situation. Every version of Spock, yes. So that's my answer. But mostly because he's just like in every instantiation of Spock, he is like such an interesting like. He's like a little bit unhinged, but also like definitely if Spock were an Earth human, he definitely is an immigrant, and he's also mixed race. So I vibe with, and he likes science.
Yes. You know? I mean, you know what I'm going to say about your answer.
Yeah.
It's highly logical. Yes. Eric, how about you?
I struggled with this one, to be honest, so there's this Asian guy who's on in the movie version, you know, with Chris Pine. I only know who he is because he did Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. I don't actually remember his name right now.
John Cho is the actor that you're talking about.
John
Lieutenant
Cho.
Sulu is the character.
Thank you.
George Takei is the original actor playing. Sorry, go ahead.
You know, I just want more cool Asian guys on TV and in movies, and that's a representation I want to see, and so it doesn't matter if I don't know their name, as long as they're there and I can see them. That's cool.
And this stage has 1 1/2 Asians on it. So that's really strong
There you
representation.
go.
50%.
All right. Well, thank you. Let's round of applause for Eric and Lyn. I have been asked to cut to a brief commercial break before we all head out and get some drinks. Head over and get some drinks.